Joining us now is Jeff Clayton. He's executive director with the American Bail Coalition. He joins us by phone and wants to talk about algorithms which determine this really sounds like some Minority Report. So I don't know if you remember that Steven Spielberg film with Tom Cruise in it a while ago about, just sort of determining the criminal aptitude or criminal inclinations of folks and basically putting computerized justice in place of cash bail. And so Jeff Clayton wants to talk to us. It's a very controversial sort of way the system is being reformed right now. He joins us by phone. Jeff, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Charles. Thanks for having me on again.
All right, good. So talk to us about, so that's where we're headed, and that's what's being put more in place as opposed to cash bail, is essentially determining people's propensity for crime through a database, through an algorithm, letting basically artificial intelligence determine that, as opposed to just, and these are for particularly convicted criminals doing that as opposed to cash bail. Some people saying that should be the way to go, because the cash bail system for so long has been, the way it's been carried out or meted out has been very doesn't have a whole lot of parity to it. It's been very discriminatory. So I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think regardless of where you come down on the bail issue, how much bail should be used, how much shouldn't, this is the hottest issue in criminal justice right now. I mean, every day it's another research article on, is it race and gender neutral? Does it work? You get the public side policy or public safety side of the coin, where we're seeing, gun charges being labeled as low risk, and then head scratchers on the low end, like the New Jersey weed man who was in prison for 16 months preventatively with no bail, based on the scores of these algorithms. So, and just another article this morning, a national survey of a nationally representative survey showing that the public strongly disfavors these, and they don't trust them, and they don't think they're fair. So it's really just an exploding issue right now.
Yeah, and explain how that works. So is it for everyone, or is it just for convicted criminals or convicted felons? You're determining a person's criminal risk assessment. And so explain how this new algorithm is working. Is it like, are all jurisdictions now sort of headed in this direction, or, is it still some time before you have like multiple jurisdictions adopting this new system or this new process?
Well, it's all over the place in the criminal justice system, widely used, increasing. It starts at policing, believe it or not. The New Orleans City Council didn't know the police were using a policing algorithm called PredPol, tell the police where to go arrest people, where the crimes are. All the way through from bail to sentencing to pleas to whether you get probation or parole, whether you're housed in a halfway house. In the state of Ohio, for example, they have 11 risk assessments that they use throughout the entire process of the system. So I would say they're heavily embedded in the system right now.
You feel like these risk assessments, they're not race or gender neutral?
Well, I think a lot of them are not transparent. Some of them have been shown not to be race and gender neutral, particularly the Compass tool, which was one example that ProPublica evaluated. All of them suffer from the same general flaw, which is we just assign people to a grouping. You're group 1, you're group 2, you're group 3, you're group 4. All of them essentially do that. And so doing that, I mean, I think there's major problems. And the other thing I'll tell you is just, last week or this morning in the Houston Chronicle, in fact, a professor down at Rice University in Houston has basically said this is symptomatic of the entire problem of mass incarceration, that we are attempting and have been since 1970 to label everyone as a certain level of risk and assign criminal interventions based on that. And I think he's got a major point that's worth looking into at this point.
Do we see that this is widespread? I mean, is it widespread enough? I mean, I noticed you sort of pointed out a couple of cases which some people might say are isolated, but is it isolated or is it not? I mean, is it widespread where this algorithm is not being utilized correctly, or it's spitting out incorrect data and thereby letting dangerous people walk the streets?
I think so, and just in the issue that I work on, bail reform issues, I mean, I've seen hundreds of these. There's hundreds of jurisdictions using them. It's the Wild West from I'm just going to take a product off the shelf from another jurisdiction to, I'm going to spend millions of dollars to build my own.
Well, what's the trend though? I mean, do we have any data on that right now that's saying, okay, X amount or percentage of people who've been processed through this risk assessment tool? Do we have that yet? Do we have that sort of clear data-driven picture of, you know what, there's so many folks who are being released because of this risk assessment tool, or who are being unfairly targeted because of this risk assessment tool, that maybe we should kind of take reverse course on this?
Yeah, that's the problem. We don't, and that's what we're pushing for. Is one, is it effective, and two, is it biased? And if it's biased, can we tolerate that or not? And that's really where we want to get.
Yeah. So we're talking with Jeff Clayton. He's executive director for the American Bail Coalition. You can go to AmericanBailCoalition.org for more information on what they do and what they're proposing. And what are you proposing in to replace or in place of this risk assessment algorithm? Like what could we do? What's a better system in your mind?
Well, I think big data to look at system-wide issues has been important. And, in the bail context, we've seen that where, this jurisdiction has a bunch of people in jail on $100 bail, and what should we do about that? So that helps illuminate solutions, I think, and that's important. And obviously, we think better information is always good to judges, but we just don't think a computer should go in and score it. Judges need the info, and then people need to go make their arguments as to what conditions they get, and it shouldn't be routine. It shouldn't be, I'm a 6, so I get no bail, or I'm a 5, so I get an ankle monitor and house arrest. I mean, how is that individualized? So I think that's what we're proposing, for more individualized consideration rather than grouping. With
that, and that theoretically that sounds good, right? Jeff, there've been lots of concern about, okay, the criminal justice is being overwhelmed, and then when you do that, when you apply that individualized consideration, there's bias from human beings that's just as prominent as bias from artificial intelligence from a database. So how do you counter that, or how do you address those concerns?
I think that's true, and that's another area for research, is to find out whether they actually do better. Some research indicates that they don't. And the other argument that I recently heard that I think is persuasive is that the computer locks in a backward-looking view, whereas human beings can change their biases and their outcomes. And once you lock it in with a computer, and for example, one in a very large state in the United States hasn't been revalidated since 2009. So we've locked in the mentality of 2009, regardless of what we do today.
Well, yeah, and I have some concerns about that too, Jeff. Because you are seeing increasingly more stories about how biased, how, for example, racist artificial intelligence can be, or certain systems that have already been deployed by huge technology giants like Google, for example. In terms of providing that type of like quick on-demand sort of information. Or to communicate through a variety of tools with human beings. There's all this bias that's very pronounced, and that's showing itself in a lot of these new systems and this new technology that we're using. So I do have concerns there. However, folks have concerns obviously about the old school kind of cash bail system, and so should we kind of like that's still there in many jurisdictions. So should we what's sort of the next step? Should we sort of put a moratorium on these risk assessment tools and reintroduce those cash bail systems? Maybe something that's a little bit more refined and reformed.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's probably the answer is, we don't want to go to the no money bail system, and we can go on and on about how that is really probably the biggest increase in pretrial mass incarceration in the history of this country, the Bail Reform Act of 1984, and the reliance on these scoring systems and the whole tripling of pretrial incarceration that we had. So what we need to go back to is, you're right, is to evaluate where bail is appropriate, to put it on a level playing field, because now we have all these other things like ankle monitors and all this sort of stuff that we didn't think about a generation ago that can be very restrictive on people, especially if a third party can provide bail. So, I think rote reliance on a monetary bail system is probably something that needs to change. And like I said, other reforms at the low end of the system is, we've certainly been out in favor of, people not getting a hearing for 13 days on a $200 bail, and all the due process issues that we saw throughout the South that we've been supporting. So I think there are avenues for change, and that's what going to go on.
And folks have concern, as far as that, like $100, $200 for some people, particularly in a poor city like Philadelphia. And so cash bail's been a big issue in Philadelphia, for example. Some folks can't afford that. And so what about that economic aspect of that cash bail debate about whether or not we need to have it still, whether we need to expand it or refine it? Some people are like, even like $100, $200, $500 bill, I just can't afford. And people just being locked up in jail in perpetuity because they can't afford what might seem like small amounts, but really aren't.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. And the way I explain it is, when do the incentives break down? In other words, when is it buying your way out of jail and when is it securing your release? And there's a point. And we think it's probably a lot higher than 100 or two, because who's going to do anything? If you fail to appear, you lose $100. That's no incentive for anybody. And so we've advocated maybe there should be a concept of a minimum bail to, one, force some of these lower-level people out of jail, or two, find other alternatives for them, whether it's, drug treatment or drug court or other, avenues.
What's that minimum? What would that minimum be like? Is it $50? Is it $100?
No, years ago, when I represented a client in Colorado, we tried to set the minimum bail at $750 because we felt like that was the minimum where a bail bondsman would try to do something, or a third party would try to do somebody to recover them when they failed to appear to court. And below that, it's almost just buying your way out and holding people for, no incentive, really, no security.
Now that's high. Like $750 could be like a lot for that. That could be just life crushing for someone who like may be unemployed or jobless, and then suddenly like finds himself at the wrong place at the wrong time. And so, how does the system adjust to that? I mean, I guess that's where that individualized treatment or concern comes in.
Yeah, we looked at it like it was a $75 bond premium with a payment plan. So, at that point, you're probably indigent, and we should look at what to do about it. So, yeah. And I think indigency issues are throughout the system. It's what do you do with people who can't pay their fines? They can't pay their treatment and all this other sort of thing that other people could afford to pay.
And, I'm real curious too, Jeff. I'd like to get your view because, and I don't know if this is how attached it is to the cash bail debate. And I am real curious. I want to learn more. I'm looking into it more, this risk assessment system, because I'm skeptical of that as well. So I mean, it's a very complex issue, and we have to kind of look at it from a variety of perspectives. The clean slate legislation that just passed in the Pennsylvania state legislature, is that something that you all were opposed to, or did you find some reforms in it that were that you were in agreement with, that you feel could effectively reform that system?
Well, I think it's what we see. We didn't involve ourselves in this legislation, but what we see is recidivism and the endless cycle, and the idea that once people get into the system, it's very difficult for them to get out. Yeah. And anything we can do to stop that, I think, is important, particularly when we're talking about an issue that really technology has made a reality. In 1970, if you did a background check, you might have missed a few convictions, right? You could move away and start over and reform your life. And now, once you do something, Google's going to find out and you're done.
Right.
The problem is the dark web probably still has a lot of that information on there.
Okay. And here's the other question too, with this risk assessment tool and your opposition to it. Have you had those conversations with the manufacturers, with the technology providers, with the tech sector about this risk assessment tool, and if it's not going anywhere, how they can make it better?
It's not going anywhere, largely because the owners of them have proprietary contracts, and they don't have to share how they put them all together, and that's the fundamental issue that we're fighting. At the local level and at the state level, I think people have been receptive to this issue. This issue wasn't really our issue. This issue turned into an issue because the risk assessments are calibrated basically to gore our ox, and any other political time they could be calibrated to, lock everybody up if you wanted to do that. So that's what we have a problem with, is the lack of transparency on these things, and just in general throughout the system.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned that. Yeah, I'd have issues with it too, because it's like you're using like public dollars to pay for the implementation of these systems or the use of these systems by public agencies, right? So you would think that they'd have to be transparent, in order to sign these contracts for public money, right? Why isn't that the case? I mean, why are public officials putting pressure on those companies to show how they operate or how they create these assessment tools?
I think the public officials behind the times on this. Obviously, what we've discovered is they can assert trade secret protections to stop this from coming out in a criminal case. They have these proprietary contracts, and the public just is kind of asleep at the wheel. The other thing they're doing is, think of the accumulation of the data they have. One private foundation, the Arnold Foundation tool, has over 1 million files, 1 million criminal cases being stored, and that was when they first built the thing, not to mention the 30-some jurisdictions they continue to pull data out of. And what are they doing with all of that? We just like the Google thing and the Facebook thing. The government just needs to wake up, and so does the public on this.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Public
whether you like Bill or not.
It's concerning, and you're absolutely right. Public officials are way behind when it comes to technology issues or anything dealing with technology. They're still stuck in the 20th century, like the last quarter of the 20th century, still, if that. And so that's reason for concern, and we need to demand a little bit more vigor or rigorous oversight from public officials on issues like that. We've had Jeff Clayton on with us. He's executive director of the American Bail Coalition. Go to AmericanBailCoalition.org for more information. And he's been joining us here on Reality Check. I think it's your second time, Jeff, since last time we talked to you. I don't think we were talking about this issue. We were talking about something else. So thanks for being on. I appreciate it.